Crash. That was the sound of a full-sized pickup truck, crumpling like a soda can, against my mailbox. Not a scratch on the steel post, not a dent in the mailbox itself. But the truck? Bent axle, shattered windshield, front bumper peeled back like a banana. It was a mess, and I watched it all happen live on my security camera, popcorn in hand. See, this wasn't a one-time incident. This wasn't a drunk driver or a random accident. No, this was a targeted hit. Someone in town thought they'd teach me a lesson by sideswiping my mailbox at 30 miles per hour. Thing is, I had been waiting for this moment, because this wasn't my first rodeo. For 6 straight months, my mailbox had been under siege. Sledgehammers, baseball bats, steel pipes. Someone even tried to yank it out with chains. Every time I replaced it, they'd destroy it within days, sometimes hours. It was personal and relentless. I moved out here to escape the city. I bought a beautiful piece of rural land, hoping for peace, quiet, and maybe a new start. But almost as soon as I arrived, I discovered my land had been used, without permission, as a sort of unofficial hangout spot. Locals had been hunting on it, parking on it, riding ATVs across it, like it was theirs. When I politely put up signs and asked them to stop, that's when the mailbox war began. At first, I thought it was just a prank, some teenagers being stupid. But it kept happening, and every time I went to the sheriff's department, I got the same shrug. Maybe get a stronger mailbox, one deputy told me, half laughing, like I was the punchline to some small-town joke. So I did, but not in the way he expected. I built a mailbox that could survive a war. Half-inch steel plate on all sides, fully welded, mounted to a solid steel post, 4 feet deep in reinforced concrete. It looked like an ordinary mailbox from the outside. I even gave it a little red flag for charm. But it was a silent trap, a fortress. And then I waited. I installed cameras. I kept replacing the destroyed mailboxes like bait. Let them think they were still winning. Let them get cocky. Then came the night of the crash. The driver didn't stand a chance. He swerved just enough to hit the box dead on, thinking it'd crumple like the last ones. But instead, he crumpled. The entire front end of his truck folded in on itself. He limped away. My mailbox stood there like a monument. And here's where it gets good. I had the footage. I had every smashed mailbox documented. I had receipts. And I had the law on my side. Because what most people don't know is that destroying a mailbox is a federal offense, not a slap on the wrist. Federal. As in, you're going to court. That 19-year-old kid learned the hard way. His insurance didn't cover federal crimes. And the sheriff? Suddenly, not so amused anymore. That crash didn't just end the harassment. It changed the way the whole town looked at me. And it all started with one sarcastic comment from law enforcement and a whole lot of welding. But before we get to the moment the truck met its steel fate, let me take you back. Back to the first week I moved in. Back to when I thought all I needed for a peaceful life was a few acres and good intentions. Turns out, I needed a little more than that. When I bought the land, it felt like winning the lottery. After years in the city, honking traffic, cramped apartments, people stacked on top of each other, the idea of owning actual acres of land felt unreal. A whole world to myself. Trees, open sky, quiet. I wasn't looking for luxury. I was looking for space. The property wasn't fancy, but it was perfect to me. A little farmhouse that needed work, a barn that leaned a little too far left, and a mailbox at the edge of the long gravel driveway that marked the end of my world and the start of the rest. I'd spent most of my adult life working from a laptop in coffee shops and shared office spaces. Out here, my coffee shop was a front porch. My office chair was a rocking chair. I was all in on the dream. Planting a garden, fixing fences, chopping wood like I knew what I was doing. It was peaceful. Almost. At first, the neighbors seemed friendly. Not chatty, but polite. A wave here and there. But there was something guarded, like I was being sized up. The guy from the city, the outsider. It didn't take long before I figured out why. See, what I didn't know, and what nobody bothered to tell me, was that, for years, my property had been used as an unofficial extension of the town. Hunters would walk through it during deer season. Kids would ride dirt bikes across the back pasture. Trucks would pull in and park along the side of my gravel drive during Friday night bonfires at the neighbors. It wasn't theirs legally, but in their eyes, it might as well have been. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe they just didn't realize the land had new ownership. Maybe they thought it was still abandoned, or that nobody cared. So I put up a few signs. Nothing aggressive, just simple, polite. Private property, please no parking, and no trespassing beyond this point. That's when the tone changed. The waves stopped. The stares started. I heard a few muttered comments at the gas station, cold shoulders at the diner. A subtle message was being sent. I had broken an unspoken agreement, one I never agreed to, and one afternoon, as I was hauling bags of soil out of my truck, a guy in a camo jacket and boots pulled up, rolled down his window and said, "You know, people round here don't take kindly to fences where they ain't used to seeing 'em." I laughed it off. I thought it was just small-town banter. It wasn't. Because a few days later, my brand-new mailbox, the first thing I'd fixed up, freshly painted and sitting proud at the road, was knocked clean off its post. I figured it was an accident. I was wrong. The mailbox incident stuck with me, but I tried not to overthink it. Maybe it was an accident. A delivery truck misjudged the turn. A teen driver clipped it. Either way, I replaced it with something sturdier. Same look, new post, fresh paint. I even added a few reflectors to make it more visible at night. But the unease lingered. The energy in town had shifted. Conversations quieted when I walked into the hardware store. People I'd waved to 2 weeks ago now acted like I didn't exist. It wasn't hostility. Not yet. But it was something colder than indifference. And I started noticing other things. Truck tire marks across my side pasture. Boot prints near the edge of the woods. Beer cans tossed near the property line. Once, I found a pair of camo gloves hung over the fence, like someone had walked through, realized I'd been there, and left in a hurry. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I tried to talk. One afternoon, I walked over to my nearest neighbor's place. The guy was maybe in his 50s, heavy-set, wearing an old John Deere cap, and working on a lawnmower that hadn't run since 1998. I introduced myself, thanked him for keeping the place in good shape before I moved in, and brought up the dirt bikes I'd seen riding near my barn. He didn't look up, just said, "Kids ride out there sometimes." "Always have," I smiled, trying to keep it friendly. "Right, and I totally get that. Just trying to keep things safe now that I'm fixing the fences and planting some new stuff. Wouldn't want anyone getting hurt." He finally looked at me and said, "Well, they ain't hurt yet." And that was that. I tried 2 more conversations with 2 different neighbors. Same pattern. Blank stares. One guy said, "You city folk think you own every blade of grass. Soon as you sign a deed." That one stung. So I stopped, trying to be the friendly new guy, and started drawing actual lines. I bought a few more private property signs, hung them on trees, stapled them to fence posts. Not threatening, just clear. I didn't want to be the bad guy. I just wanted to be respected. Or at least left alone. I added trail cameras. Not for spying, just for peace of mind. I wasn't trying to catch anyone doing anything, but deep down, I hoped they'd see the red lights blinking and think twice about walking through my woods without permission. And then the mailbox got hit again. Harder this time. Post snapped at the base. Metal twisted. It wasn't a careless nudge. This was deliberate. Someone was sending a message. "We don't care what you think. This land still belongs to us." And that's when I knew this wasn't going to stop on its own. After that second hit, I stopped giving anyone the benefit of the doubt. This wasn't a one-off. It wasn't mischief. It was a message. Someone, or several someones, wanted me to know that I didn't belong. And they chose the mailbox because it was the most visible thing I owned. My flag on the hill, so I replaced it again. Bought another standard mailbox and a new post. Took my time installing it, leveled it properly. Dug deeper this time, poured a little concrete. Tried to give it a fighting chance, didn't matter. 3 days later, it was bent in half like a paper clip. I stared at it for a while that morning. Cup of coffee in one hand, broken post in the other. There wasn't even any mail inside. They didn't care about the function. It was about ownership. Who controlled what? And I was being told, again, that I didn't. That week, I went to the sheriff's office. Sat down with a deputy. Younger guy, seemed mildly interested until I mentioned the mailbox. Then he leaned back and gave me a look like I'd just walked in complaining about a raccoon. "So, what do you want us to do?" he asked, not even bothering to hide his irritation. "I want it to stop," I said. He shrugged. "It's just a mailbox. People knock those over all the time. Kids being stupid. Probably won't happen again." I told him it had happened again, multiple times. He raised an eyebrow. "Maybe you should get a stronger mailbox." And that's when I realized I was alone in this. To them, I wasn't a victim. I was a nuisance. A new guy stirring up dust over something they saw as normal. A mailbox? That's small-town wear and tear. No big deal. Not worth paperwork. Definitely not worth patrolling gravel roads for. Still, I documented everything. Took photos of the damage. Kept receipts for each replacement. Installed a cheap trail camera on a nearby tree. Not super hidden, but enough to make someone pause. Or so I thought. It didn't pause anyone. Mailbox number 4 lasted a week. Mailbox 5, 2 days. Someone ran that one over with enough force to leave bumper shards in the gravel. That one hit different. Not just because of the damage, but because of the sound it made at 2:30 in the morning. A loud thud, then screeching tires. I ran outside in my pajamas, flashlight in hand, heart racing, no sign of the vehicle. Just the remains of what used to be my mailbox, bent and scattered like driftwood. Concrete base split. Mailbox split in 2. Post completely uprooted, and the trail cam? Gone. Snapped off its strap. Never found it. That's when the anger started to bubble up. It wasn't just the damage. It was the feeling of being powerless. Of knowing someone was targeting me and laughing about it. Of realizing that even when I played by the rules, no one cared. So I went quieter. Stopped telling neighbors what was happening. Stopped talking about it at all. Just kept replacing the boxes and writing down the dates. Box 6, Box 7, Box 8. The months started to blur. It became a routine. Mail. Destroyed. Replace. Repeat. But every time, I built it back just a little better. Added steel brackets. Used treated lumber. Dug the post deeper. Anything to make it last just a little longer. It never did. And with every replacement, I could feel it. The pressure building. This slow, passive war over a single spot of land at the end of my driveway. A battle I didn't ask for, but one I was now deeply entrenched in. That mailbox had become a symbol, and I was tired of watching it fall. And with every replacement, I could feel it. The pressure building. This slow, passive war over a single spot of land at the end of my driveway. A battle I didn't ask for, but one I was now deeply entrenched in. That mailbox had become a symbol, and I was tired of watching it fall. But more than that, I was tired of being watched. Every time I dug a new post hole, I felt eyes on me. I didn't know if it was the woods, or someone parked far off, or just my own nerves, but I felt it. That creeping sensation that I was being mocked silently by people who thought I'd give up, that I'd pack my bags, sell the land, and run back to the city like I didn't belong here. And maybe, just maybe, they were right about one thing. I didn't belong here, But I wasn't going anywhere. At mailbox number 9, I stopped pretending I was just unlucky. I walked the wreckage back to my porch, dumped it by the steps, and just stared at it. Bent steel, shattered wood, dirt still clinging to the base like it had been yanked from the earth by force. And maybe it had. This time, I didn't wait. I called the sheriff's department that same morning. Not 911, just the front desk. A deputy picked up, and I asked, as calmly as I could, if someone could come take a report. The silence on the line said it all. "You said, a mailbox?" the deputy asked, like he was making sure he heard me right. "Yes," I said. "This is the 9th one. I have photos. And timestamps. And now, I'm missing another trail camera." Another pause. Then, "Well, sir, mailboxes get knocked over all the time. Weather, plows, kids. You know how it is." "I don't know how it is," I said. "I've lived here less than a year, and I've replaced more mailboxes than birthdays. Someone is doing this on purpose." Eventually, they agreed to send someone out. He showed up in a dusty SUV with faded lettering and mirrored sunglasses that made him look like he stepped out of a movie. Walked slow, didn't write anything down. Just looked at the mess, scratched his chin, and said, "Welp, that's a mess all right." I showed him the photos. The damage, the receipts. I pointed out the missing camera strap still hanging from the tree. I explained the escalating pattern, that this wasn't random, that I believed it was connected to my land use. He squinted at the base of the post and nodded like he was thinking, then looked me dead in the eye and said, "Maybe you ought to just get yourself a stronger mailbox." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" He shrugged. "If it keeps getting knocked down, maybe it's time to build one they can't knock down so easy." There was no offer to investigate. No curiosity about who might be behind it. No writing down of anything at all. That was it. That was the official advice from the local authority. Get a stronger mailbox. And in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't just the dismissal. It was the tone, casual, almost amused, like I was being laughed at, not just by the vandals, but now by the people I was supposed to count on. And if they weren't going to take it seriously, then maybe I'd take their words at face value. Maybe I'd take their sarcasm and turn it into malicious compliance. The ride back into town that day was quiet, but my head was loud. I wasn't angry, not in the explosive sense. I was something colder, focused, resolved. They wanted me to build a stronger mailbox? Fine, I'd build the last one I'd ever need. That night, I pulled out my laptop and started sketching. Not a sketch of a mailbox, but a monument. When people talk about malicious compliance, they usually mean following orders in a way that exposes how absurd the rules really are. In my case, it meant taking the sheriff's words. Get a stronger mailbox, and executing them to the letter. With a welder and a plan, I wasn't an engineer, not professionally, but I'd spent years tinkering with metal and machinery as a hobby. Welding, machining, sketching ideas just for fun. And now, for the first time, I had a real target. A real problem to solve, a real project. I gave myself 2 rules. The mailbox had to be 100% legal. USPS-approved size, height, placement. It had to survive anything short of a tank. I started with the base, a 6-inch diameter steel pipe, the kind used in highway guardrails. Thick-walled, heavy. I bought a length long enough to bury 4 feet into the ground and leave another 4 feet standing above. It was so heavy I needed help just to lift it into the truck. Next was the mailbox itself. I could have used steel all the way through, but that would have been obvious. The key to malicious compliance is stealth. So I took a standard mailbox shell, then built a custom internal skeleton around it. 1/2-inch plate steel forming a tight frame, welded into a single piece with internal reinforcements. It looked ordinary from the road, but underneath, it was a coffin for anyone foolish enough to take a swing. The post was welded to a steel base plate, which I then sunk into a 3-foot cube of concrete. Rebar reinforced the whole block. I dug the hole with a rented auger and poured the concrete myself, one bag at a time, over 2 days. I didn't rush it. While it cured, I worked on the disguise, painted the outside with matte black rust-resistant enamel, added a plastic flag, even rubbed some dirt on it to make it look old. From 10 feet away, you'd think it came off the shelf at any hardware store, but the real trick was placement. I positioned it with surgical precision, just close enough to the road for legal mail delivery, but also right on the edge of a soft gravel shoulder where people tended to swerve when they were trying to accidentally clip something. And then came the surveillance. This time, I didn't settle for a cheap trail cam. I installed a full security system, wired into solar with battery backup, streaming to cloud storage, wide-angle lens, night vision, motion alerts to my phone. The camera was mounted up high in a tree, camouflaged in a custom box that looked like a birdhouse. If anyone tried to take a swing at this mailbox, I wouldn't just know, I'd see them. In HD, it was, without exaggeration, the most thought-out thing I'd ever built. And when I finished tightening the final bolt, I just stood there and stared at it. From the road, it looked harmless. From the front porch, it looked like justice. I didn't tell anyone, didn't brag, didn't hint. I just went back to my normal routine. Mail came. I waved at the mail carrier. Life continued. But part of me was waiting, not out of fear, out of curiosity. Because I knew, deep down, they wouldn't be able to resist. They'd hit it again. And this time, they'd regret it. After that night, things got quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peace. It's planning. You could feel it in the way the wind moved through the trees, like something was holding its breath. And I was too. I'd done my part. The box was ready. The cameras were running. The bait was in place. And now all I had to do was wait. But waiting can make you crazy. I started double-checking everything. Twice a day. Post still solid? Check. Concrete undisturbed? Check. Camera feed? Clear. I even tested the Wi-Fi booster I'd rigged up to keep the camera online in bad weather. No blind spots. No excuses. I wasn't just defending a mailbox anymore. I was defending a principle, and maybe a little of my own sanity. The mailbox sat out there like a statue. Every morning I passed it. Part of me thought, this is overkill. What are you doing? But the other part, the quieter, steelier part, whispered back, no, this is exactly the right amount of kill. And that part was winning. One evening, just before sunset, I saw something that made my stomach twist. Fresh tire marks. Not mine. Not the mail carrier's. A distinct tread pattern coming in from the opposite side of the road, veering toward the box, and stopping just short of the gravel. They hadn't touched it, but they'd come close. A drive-by? A scouting trip? Testing the ground, the angle? It didn't matter. It confirmed what I already knew. Someone was planning something. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up with the monitor on, watching the feed like it was a movie. There was nothing and more nothing. Hours of still trees, crickets, occasional deer. But I didn't care, because I wasn't waiting for if anymore. I was waiting for when. And then it happened. Exactly 12 days after I installed the mailbox, 3:16 a.m., the camera triggered a truck, big one, full size, black, old, headlights off, creeping slow down the road. You could hear the gravel crunch under the tires through the mic. It paused, then it accelerated, not a full throttle, just a sudden, sharp lurch, a short burst of speed, enough to send a message, or maybe to destroy one. And in one brutal moment, the truck veered right, aiming directly for the mailbox. The camera caught it perfectly. The screech, the impact, the shudder of the steel post, the instant stop, You could hear the crunch of metal folding in on itself. Then, reverse lights. The truck tried to back up, but the front was mangled. It moved maybe a foot before stalling. Steam poured from under the hood. The driver stumbled out, clutching his arm. Looked around, panicked. Tried to yank the mailbox free, couldn't. Then staggered off down the road. And the mailbox? Still standing. Unmoved. Untouched. Victorious. I sat there in the glow of the screen, heart pounding, not with fear, with validation. It had worked. They took the bait, and the trap snapped shut. But in the quiet that followed, I didn't celebrate. Not immediately. I just sat there, staring at the footage, heart hammering in my chest, not with adrenaline, but with something else. Relief. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd turned the tide, that I wasn't just reacting anymore, that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't alone. I rewound the footage 3 times, studied the license plate, the angle of impact, the exact moment where steel met steel and the truck's front end buckled like it had hit a wall. Which, to be fair, it kind of had. The mailbox had barely wobbled. No scratches, no dents, just a bit of scuffed paint. And even that rubbed off with a rag the next morning. I walked down to it after the sun came up, still half in disbelief. The truck was gone by then, but pieces of it were still scattered across the gravel. A busted fog light, twisted bits of trim, and a trail of fluid leading away like blood from a wounded animal. I took more photos. Not out of pride, but evidence. This wasn't revenge. This was documentation, because I knew the next step. And this time, I wasn't going to the sheriff asking for help. I was going to show them what happens when you dismiss someone one time too many. I walked back into the house with a strange mix of satisfaction and stillness in my chest. The footage was clear. Too clear. Every second of it. The approach, the hit, the aftermath, looked like it belonged in a documentary about natural selection. The moment that truck connected with the mailbox, it folded like it had hit a concrete barrier. Because, technically, it had. I watched the video a few more times before downloading it. The angles, the timestamps, the slow crawl of the truck, the way the driver angled it just right for maximum destruction. Like they knew exactly where to hit. But what they didn't know was that this box wasn't like the others. This box fought back. And now the truck was totaled. The driver was injured. And I had the whole thing recorded in 1080p with full audio. You could even hear the guy yell when the airbags went off. I called the sheriff's office again. But this time, I wasn't asking for help. This time, I had the help. They sent the same deputy as before. The one who told me to get a stronger mailbox. He pulled into my driveway with the same old SUV, same mirrored sunglasses, same tired energy. I met him halfway down the driveway, phone in hand, video queued up. "Something happen again?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "This time, I did exactly what you told me." He looked confused until I hit play. I watched his face while the footage rolled. The quiet stare. The slow blink when the truck hit. The slight wince when the front end crumpled like a soda can. He said nothing for a few seconds. Then, "That's federal property." "Yup," I said. "And you've got footage, license plate, timestamp?" "Yup." He watched it again, this time with more attention. I could tell he realized the gravity. The mailbox hadn't just been vandalized. It had been targeted. On purpose. "At speed. Where's the truck now?" he asked. "Gone." But it left pieces all over the gravel. I bagged a few. He took a slow breath, finally reaching for his notepad. "First time in months. What's your camera setup?" he asked. I showed him the rig, the cloud upload, the backup. He nodded, scribbled notes, made a few quiet phone calls. Then he looked at me and said the words I never thought I'd hear. "This might actually be felony level." See? What a lot of people don't realize is that mailboxes in the U.S., even the cheap ones, are protected under federal law, tampering with or destroying one isn't just vandalism. It's a federal crime. Felony charges, potential jail time, fines. But targeting one, repeatedly, on private property? That's a whole different category. Within 48 hours, the truck was found, still wrecked, sitting behind a buddy's barn, hidden under a tarp. The driver, 19 years old, was picked up for questioning. When shown the footage, he didn't deny it. Just sat there, pale-faced, mumbling something about just a joke. He wasn't laughing when he learned what he was being charged with. Federal property destruction, intent to cause harm, reckless endangerment, and thanks to the footage, there was no room to argue. The community? Word got out fast. Too fast. I never even posted the video online. Didn't need to. Someone at the sheriff's office talked, and the story spread like wildfire. It wasn't just that the kid got caught. It was that I'd built a mailbox that beat a truck. That story alone was enough to light the town on fire. Figuratively. People who hadn't looked me in the eye in months were suddenly waving at me from across the parking lot. The same old-timer who once told me, "People round here don't take kindly to fences," nodded silently as I walked past him in the feed store. Some folks even dropped by, just to see how I was doing. But we both knew what they really wanted, to get a look at the box. And I let them. I didn't gloat, didn't tell the story unless they asked. But I didn't hide it either. I'd kept my head down long enough. Meanwhile, the sheriff's department did what they should have done months ago. They took the evidence. They built a case. They worked with a federal postal inspector who, to my surprise, took the situation very seriously. Apparently, the USPS doesn't play games when it comes to destruction of mail infrastructure. They were even more upset than I was. Turns out, that little red flag on the side of the mailbox might as well be a badge. Damage it deliberately. And you're not just facing angry homeowners, you're facing the United States government. The kid's parents tried to step in, claimed he was just a dumb teen, that he didn't mean any harm. But when the inspector showed them the footage and the list of previous mailbox destructions and the notes I'd kept, the parents' tune changed. Fast. They offered to pay for damages, to apologize, to make things right. But it was too late for that. This wasn't about dollars. It was about finally being heard. The day the charges were officially filed, I sat on my porch and watched the road, the same stretch of gravel where months earlier I'd seen trucks roll past like wolves circling a new scent. Now, nothing but dust, silence, and the sound of wind moving through trees. It felt like winning, but more than that, it felt like closure. That box didn't just protect my mail, it protected my peace of mind. It ended something that had gnawed at me, quietly, for far too long. And I didn't do it with threats or shouting or violence. I did it with steel and patience and quiet, lawful compliance. The sheriff never said sorry, but a few weeks later, he waved as he drove past. First time he'd ever done that, and honestly, that was enough. Once the story got out, everything changed. People who once avoided eye contact were suddenly making small talk at the gas station. I'd gone from that city guy with an attitude to the guy who built the indestructible mailbox. Some treated me like a folk hero. Others like I was a walking reminder that maybe, just maybe, this town wasn't as untouchable as it thought it was. No one said it directly, of course. That's not how small towns work. But the tone had shifted. I could feel it in the way folks slowed down when they drove past my place. The way no trucks parked on my shoulder anymore. The way I'd find my trash bins placed neatly back by the road after collection. Something no one had ever done before. Even the mail carrier, who used to drive up the road like it was a racetrack, now took a full 3 seconds to nod at the mailbox before delivering. She never said a word, but she never missed a day again either. And the mailbox? Not a single new scratch. People in town talked about it like it was a living thing. Did you see that mailbox? Heard it totaled a Chevy. Don't mess with that guy's driveway. It was the kind of legend that sticks. The kind that gets exaggerated over time until, one day, someone's telling their grandkid that I buried a bank vault at the road and dared anyone to touch it. Meanwhile, the legal side kept unfolding. The 19-year-old who hid it ended up facing multiple charges. The most serious one was destruction of federal property, which carried real weight. His lawyer tried to argue that he thought it was just a regular mailbox, but the footage made that hard to defend. The slow crawl, the deliberate angle, the acceleration, it was calculated, and the judge saw right through it. He didn't go to prison, not for that, but he did get hit with probation, thousands in fines, mandatory community service, and a federal record that would follow him for a long time. The truck totaled. Insurance wouldn't cover it. It was ruled intentional damage. His parents were humiliated. I heard later they considered moving out of town just to escape the whispers. But I didn't celebrate. That wasn't the point. The point was that it finally stopped. The trespassing, the intimidation, the passive-aggressive accidents, that long, slow campaign to make me feel like an outsider on my own land. Over. Just like that. But what surprised me most wasn't the legal victory. It was the silence. No apologies. No explanations. No late-night visits to say sorry. Just absence. Like the whole town had decided to hit the reset button without admitting there'd ever been a problem. And you know what? I was fine with that. Sometimes silence is the apology. Sometimes change doesn't come with words. It comes with space, with respect, with quiet acknowledgement that the game is over and nobody's playing anymore. I went back to my routines. Gardened, repaired fences, sat on the porch with coffee again, without that tight knot in my chest. One morning, I saw the deputy again. The same one. He didn't stop, but he slowed down. Window rolled halfway down. He looked at the mailbox, then at me, and gave a half-smile. "That thing still standing?" he called out. "Still hasn't blinked," I said. He nodded. Guess I was right after all. I didn't say anything, just raised my mug. Because, yeah, he had been right. Just not in the way he thought. I started noticing little things. One afternoon, I found a handwritten note in my mailbox. Unsigned. Barely legible. Just 4 words. Good job. About time. Nothing else. I never found out who left it, and I didn't need to. At the hardware store, a younger guy I'd seen around a few times nodded toward me and said, "Heard your box is tougher than my cousin's ATV." Another chuckled and added, "Bet that thing's welded to the earth." Then they asked me what kind of steel I used. The same people who once acted like I didn't belong were now curious. Some still kept their distance, but the air had shifted. Not friendly exactly, but respectful, cautious, like I'd passed some test I didn't know I was taking. And the whispers. Oh, they were constant. Someone told me I had booby-trapped the mailbox with rebar spikes and welded blades. Another swore it was rigged with electricity. I even heard someone claim I'd installed a motion-triggered speaker that shouted warnings in different languages. None of it was true, but I didn't correct them. Let the myth grow. The truth was simple. I built something solid, and I didn't flinch when it was tested. I stayed. I endured. I documented. I acted, and in a place where reputation means everything. That counted. From time to time, I'd get asked about what really happened. People wanted the inside scoop, but I never gave it the Hollywood version. I just said, I built it to last, and that was enough, because they already knew the rest. The crash, the charges, the fallout, the silence. The kid who hit it eventually moved. Or maybe his parents did. I never saw the truck again. Some said it was towed to a junkyard in the next county. Others said it was still sitting behind a barn, rusting quietly in shame. Either way, It never came back down my road, and no one else tried either. The mailbox never became just a mailbox again. It became a boundary line, a marker, a symbol, and maybe, in some strange way, that's all I ever wanted. Not revenge, not to be feared, just to be seen, respected, left alone. Now, I was, and every time I walked to the end of the driveway, mail in hand, past that battle-scarred but unshaken steel post, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Peace, when it finally arrived, didn't come with celebration. It came with still mornings, with long stretches of silence where my mailbox stood tall and untouched, with neighbors passing by, slow, neutral, maybe even a little more polite. There were no parties, no high fives, just space, and that was perfect. For the first time since I moved out there, I wasn't waking up with tension in my chest. I wasn't wondering what I'd find at the end of the driveway. No more shattered posts, no more stolen cameras, just mail, bills, flyers, normal life. I started sleeping better, smiling more. I caught myself humming while splitting wood one afternoon. That might not sound like much, but after months of being on edge, it felt like therapy, and something deeper had changed. Too, I stopped feeling like an outsider, not because people suddenly accepted me. This wasn't a movie, but because I'd stopped seeking approval. I realized something during all of it. You don't have to be liked to be respected, and sometimes that's better. Before all this, I'd tried to blend in, wave, be agreeable, smile through the passive jabs. I thought that would buy peace. It didn't. What bought peace was holding the line, firmly, quietly, without backing down. And that mailbox? It wasn't just steel and concrete anymore. It was a boundary, sure, but also a reminder that you can build something once, build it right, and it will hold, even when the people around you don't. Over time, the adrenaline wore off. So did the buzz in town. The story faded into local legend, and new gossip took its place. But the effect lingered. People kept their distance, in a good way. The dirt bikers stopped cutting across the pasture. No more beer cans by the fence. My property line became a line again, not a suggestion. One day, a new family moved into a house a few parcels down. I saw them unloading boxes and stopped by to say hello, just like I had months before. They seemed nice, a little cautious. I could see it in their eyes. The same, "Are we welcome here?" look I used to carry. We chatted for a few minutes. Then the husband nodded toward the mailbox at the end of my drive. "Hey, is that the one?" he asked. "The mailbox?" I smiled. "Yeah, that's the one." He whistled low. "Heard it crushed a truck," I shrugged. "Might have. Depends who you ask." He laughed. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't telling the story from a place of defense anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. That battle was over, and I'd won. But winning didn't mean I went back to who I was before it all started. Something in me had shifted. For the better. I found myself walking the fence line more, not out of paranoia, but pride. Checking the posts, repairing a gate hinge, watching the wind move through the field I'd once felt like a trespasser in. Now it felt like mine, fully mine. Not because I held a deed, but because I'd earned it. And I started to love the quiet again. The honest kind. The kind that isn't waiting to explode. The kind that settles in your bones after a storm passes. There were new projects. A small greenhouse. A chicken coop. I started building a bench out by the old oak tree near the edge of the property. It wasn't for security. It was for sitting. For breathing. For finally feeling like I wasn't just surviving out here. I was living. One morning, a truck I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. An older man stepped out, tall, wiry cowboy hat pulled low. I stepped out onto the porch, cautious but calm. He introduced himself, said he owned land 2 roads over, said he'd heard about the mailbox. We chatted for a bit about steel, welding, concrete ratios. Then just before leaving, he said, "Don't let folks fool you. Most around here respect what you did." Took guts. That meant more than he knew. Respect in a small town isn't loud. It's not praise or applause. It's someone waving who never did before. It's someone slowing down instead of speeding up. It's a nod from a man in a cowboy hat who didn't need to say anything at all, but did anyway. I didn't just survive rural life, I became part of it, on my own terms. And every time I walk past that mailbox, that quiet little tank disguised as a tin box, I smile, because it reminds me, you can build your boundaries. And if you build them right, they won't just protect your property, they'll protect your peace. Looking back, it's wild to think this all started with a mailbox. Not a fist fight, not a lawsuit, not some dramatic standoff, just a box at the end of a driveway, holding nothing more than letters and bills. And yet, it was never really about the mailbox, was it? It was about a message, both theirs and mine. Theirs was, "You don't belong here." Mine became, "I'm not leaving." And it took months, stress, silence, and steel to prove it. If you'd told me when I moved here that I'd end up building a 200-pound roadside bunker just to stop people from harassing me, I would have laughed. Told you rural folks were nicer than that they respected land, that I'd fit right in. I wasn't entirely wrong. Most people do respect land, but some only respect it when it's theirs. And some need a line in the dirt, or in this case, a buried steel post, to remind them where theirs ends and yours begins. I never set out to prove a point. I just wanted quiet. I wasn't looking to win anything, but I learned something. Sometimes standing your ground isn't about noise or rage. Sometimes it's about patience, documentation, discipline, planning, and yes, malicious compliance. I followed the rules, to the letter. My mailbox was legal. My footage was clear. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't retaliate. I just took bad advice, literally, and built something they couldn't destroy. There's a strange kind of justice in that. Not courtroom justice, not dramatic showdowns, but earned justice. You don't always get apologies. You won't always get credit. But sometimes, just holding your ground and refusing to be pushed out is justice enough. And if you're watching this, wondering what to do when you're being pushed around, I won't tell you to build a weapon or a trap, but I will tell you this. You don't have to take it. You don't have to cave or run or stay quiet forever. You can draw your line. Legally, strategically, quietly. And sometimes, if you build it right, you only have to build it once.